Hey, what's up, Medium? Welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I'm Josh Hayes with my co-host Scott Moon, and today we're talking with science fiction author, podcaster, and cover designer Kevin G. Summers. Kevin is the author of The Man Who Shot John Wilkes Booth and the newly released Bleak December, along with several short stories in various anthologies, including some Star Trek anthologies back in the day, which is very cool. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
For those of you that are watching or will watch later, you will see that I am wearing a cowboy hat, and that is because I was very jealous of Kevin's hat, and I'm wearing his T-shirt, Literary Outlaws, from his podcast. So I figured if I was going to be an outlaw, I could do it with a cowboy hat, and maybe I just need to start collecting hats in like every show.
Wear that. Every show is a different hat, right?
I need to get a Christmas Santa hat.
I was going to wear the Literary Outlaw shirt myself, but I feel a little bit like a pro wrestler if I'm wearing my own shirt.
Which is weird because you guys have your little pro wrestler question at the end of your show. Mine would have been, if I was ever on the show, would have been The Undertaker, and that's not The Undertaker, The Ultimate Warrior. And I don't know why, but because I've never watched wrestling, but when I was growing up, all my friends used to watch it, and I was not allowed. But I saw this picture of the Ultimate Warrior one time with all his like bands and his mask or whatever, and I was like, "That's super cool. I like that guy." So we'll get right to it. Can you tell us, our viewers and listeners, just a little bit about yourself and how you got started in writing?
Well, I've been interested in writing my entire life. My mother was a graduate student, and when I was a little kid, she would take me to her classes, and afterwards we would go out to this bar. I didn't know it was a bar at the time, but that's definitely what it was. And I just thought writers were the coolest people in the world, and that's all I ever wanted to do when I was a kid. As I got older, I kept doing it, and I was published first in 2001 in the Star Trek Strange New Worlds anthology, and we can talk about that if you want. But yeah, I've been doing it ever since, and I got into indie publishing in 2013, I want to say, and I've been pursuing that for the last couple of years.
So you started your Star Trek anthology. I'd like to touch on that for a minute too, because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Ridiculously, I like seen every episode of TNG, probably every episode of Deep Space Nine.
Dressed up like Captain Picard, Borg for the.
I did. I did. Where's that? I did. I'm part of a geek group here in Wichita called Nerd Barrage, and we have an upcoming episode which is Star Wars versus Star Trek Family Feud, and I was the Captain Picard Locutus, and I had the Picard uniform on and then the Locutus thing on my face. So I'm interested. This was in a traditional publishing setting. How did you get into writing Star Trek fan fiction?
Well, for 10 years, Pocket Books owns the license to publish Star Trek books. And for 10 years, they put out this contest called Strange New Worlds, which was an open call to non-professional writers to write in the Star Trek universe. I had never written fanfic before, and it never was my thing. And it was just an opportunity to write Star Trek. So I was like, what the heck, I'll write one. And I wrote a DS9 story. It was using the Benny Russell character from the Far Beyond the Stars episode, which is the one where he picks up and he's a black sci-fi writer in the 50s.
Right.
And so I wrote this one story. It was my first try, and I sent it in, and it won third place in the anthology. And it was on the preliminary ballot for the Nebula Awards. I didn't win, but it looks great on my query letters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was how it happened, and then that opened the opportunity to. I wrote a second Strange New World story, and then those two opened the opportunity to do the Deep Space Nine anthology. They asked me to write a story for that, and I pitched one and worked with the editor there, Marco, and it was a really fun experience to have done Star Trek. Although I think it's hard to write other people's characters and do it well.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine it would be.
And especially in a Star Trek universe where the characters do grow, but they don't change very often. Like they always have specific things that they do and that they like, and that you can't change the fundamental nature of the character in your story. I think that would be very not difficult, but challenging to kind of keep the aspects of the character the same throughout your story.
It is challenging because it removes a layer of tension that you would otherwise have because
because you can't kill them off.
Yeah, I'm not going to kill Spock, right?
Right.
You got to keep rolling with it, and so then you have to put the tension on someone else. Are you going to kill this new character that you stuck in there? And people aren't really invested in those. And then with the DS9 stories, it's even harder because at least with Kirk or Picard or Janeway, you can stick a story in between two episodes and it doesn't really affect everything. But DS9 was so serialized that it's awfully hard to find a place to fit anything.
Right.
There's a large group of rabid fans like Josh out there that call you on everything if you mess something up. So
I don't know if I have it here or not. Yes, I do. Back in the day, I was a huge. I'm still am, but I've got the technical manual, and I read this cover to cover. And at one point, I knew exactly how the warp system worked because I would study it, and that's how geeky
that could come in useful.
Yeah. The problem with knowing how warp works is that it affected my writing when I first started writing science fiction. And so it was hard for me to find out another way to do faster than light travel because I was like, this is how warp works. It's real. I've got to make it so it's in line with that technology, and it's really not.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So how did you started out traditional, and that was 2003, I think 2008, and you had a couple other events or anthologies that you were part of. You didn't start doing indie publishing until you said 2013. So what was with the long gap in between, or was there, and why did you make the switch to indie publishing?
I had a huge gap in between because mostly I was reading, and I wasn't ready to take the plunge. And to be fair, indie publishing wasn't really a thing until 2011, 2012. Right. That it really and it was risky to me. And I had a good thing going with traditional publishing, although I wasn't really developing any fans. So the reason I made the jump is I had a chance to write a Kurt Vonnegut themed story for an anthology, and I submitted the story, and they didn't get it, even though I turned it in time. And that's so so stylized, it would not fit for anything else. And I tried a good year pitching it to other places, and nobody wanted it. A lot of people liked it, but nobody wanted it.
Right.
And then when Kindle Worlds announced the world of Kurt Vonnegut, I was like, well, shoot. So when I launched it, I was the very first one that got published because 24 hours of them turning it on, I had it ready to go.
Yeah.
And
first in line.
That was the very first one. So that was the bell curse, and I put it on Kindle Worlds, and then I was pretty much committed. Then I was like, well, this indie thing, let's see what happens. And within a couple of months, I met Michael Bunker, and we got to talking, and ended up doing the Legendarium book together. And that was such a hit that it just seemed like indie was the way to go for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'll never do traditional again, but I've made just as much, if not more, money doing indie, and I've definitely picked up more readers doing indie that I know about.
Right.
The thing with the Star Trek readers is like, I love those people. They're great, but they generally only want to read Star Trek, and they're not necessarily open to reading other stuff.
Right.
A lot of crossover between that book and your other titles and things like that, probably.
Exactly.
Which is probably a good thing because those readers that only like Star Trek books, they read them because they're not you get new Star Trek stories, but they're not anything new or groundbreaking, and they understand them, and they all pretty much like they keep everything the same, but they give you more story. And you branch out and you read other things. You're like, I don't even understand this. It's not Star Trek, so it's probably a good thing.
Like me, I know what I like, and if you like it, then you're going to be entertained, and it's a good thing.
Right.
So being both indie and traditional published, I'm curious to know if there's any pros and cons between the two that you like over the other, and maybe that you wish could mesh together.
Well, the biggest pro of traditional publishing, as far as I'm concerned, is you don't get to just take a story and put it out there. You have to work with an editor. And as much as most authors would like to think that they are John Steinbeck or something out of the gate, everybody does better when they've got an editor to tell them, hey, this is really good, you need more of this, and this part sucks, and you need to fix it. And this is why. And working with traditional editors, that was my favorite part, is I felt like I grew as an author, because I learned, this is why I don't want you to do this, and this is the reason. So that helped me improve my craft quite a bit, especially at a time that I wasn't totally confident in my voice as an author.
Right. And obviously that probably helped you into taking it into your own indie space, knowing all that feedback and criticism that you got from the traditional publisher.
Absolutely. I remember when I did the DS9 anthology, that editor, Marco, who's over at Tor now, I spent hours and hours and hours on the phone with him when we were working on that story. And I can still remember, things that he told me. And, as I'm writing, I'll think back to that and be like, oh, don't jump around from viewpoint to viewpoint inside of a section, and, different little things that I just picked up that I never knew. I don't have a traditional education. Maybe you get it in creative writing classes.
Right.
I just got reading, and then from working with them. I will say, for indies, I think most indies would benefit if they hired an editor to do not a line edit, but a developmental edit on their books.
Right.
At least one time, just so you can see what somebody has to say.
That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you about that, because I know there's a lot of difference between developmental editors and line editors, copy editors. I think there's even something called an acquisitions editor. I ran into that a few times when I was trying to go traditional years and years ago. They do more market analysis type things with your books as well. But so you're talking about a developmental editor?
Yeah, developmental. Well, they're not reading it to look for typos and to look for inconsistencies. The character's 45 here and they're 43 there. They're not actually reading it to look for that. They're looking at the big picture to say, you're delving into old time radio drama villains here, or this aid, and this is the reason why, or you have this turn of phrase that you use over and over and over again. They're looking specifically for those kind of details, stuff that you're doing wrong and what can you improve upon. Whereas the line editor, the story might suck, but they can just fix it so there's no typos in the terrible manuscript.
Right.
And if you have a big publishing house like Pocket or Tor, they have it all, and they go through all these steps. And generally, indies, they either don't edit at all, or they just use the line editor. And not to say that you need a developmental editor every time, but I would advise try it once, see what you get. You got to be open-minded to have somebody tell you that your stuff isn't any good. And
absolutely,
and this is how you do it better.
Well, yeah, especially if you're just starting out and you've got your first, second, or even your third book. If you're like, I don't know, some like the self-publishing podcast guys where they've done several books, or like you, I think you've published or had published 17 stories in various formats, and whether indie or traditional. you probably can read your own stuff and say, yes, I understand that this part's bad, so I need to fix it. But if you're just starting out and you've got 1 or 2 or 3 books out there, you might not hit your stride until your 3rd book, and you still need to get that other point of view to say, hey, this is a really great transformation from your 1st book, but you still need to work on these things too, and that it'll still help you grow as an author. And maybe by the time you get to your 5th book, you don't have to spend the money for the developmental. I'd still do the copy edit, obviously, but
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like that Outliers. Did you guys read that book Outliers?
No,
It's got the idea is that everybody that's an outlier that's absolutely great at their profession, Michael Jordan or Steve Jobs or whomever, that before they had lightning strike and became great, they had invested somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 hours applying their craft and getting good at it. Like the Beatles, played, thousands and thousands of hours. They came over here in '64 and took off. So you have to put in a lot of time, and most people don't put in the amount of time that they really need to get great.
Hey, Scott, your air conditioning is on, I think.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to mute my mic so it's not so loud. I can't turn it off because it's the heater, but I was going to say, talking about the 10,000 hour things, that's like deliberate practice. I think there's some books about those. So I've seen that in other forms. I'm going to run up and try to turn my heater off.
Okay, dude. I need to read that book. I've heard it now a couple times. People mention it about the 10,000 hour thing, and I've heard it and kind of understood what it is, but I think I really need to read that book just to take my knowledge kind of to the next step, because I think I'm hitting kind of a plateau in my writing / publishing knowledge, and I want to always keep kind of progressing in the craft.
It's like playing the guitar. I play the guitar, and I'm not very good at it. I'm okay at it. I can play some songs, and they definitely sound like the right songs. But I've hit a level where, in order to get any better, I would need to practice 2 or 3 hours a day, or take some lessons or whatever. I don't care to get any better at it. It's just a
right.
But if writing is your thing, you have to do it all the time. And the other ingredient, of course, is reading. And I talked to somebody the other day, and they wanted me to help them with some with the writing. And I got to talking to them, and I said, well, you ought to read this book. And they said, I don't have time to read books, so I don't read at all. I was like, okay, I guess I can't. You're not any better,
right? What are your favorite things to read, genre-wise? You have a favorite author?
I love Kurt Vonnegut. He's a big hero to me. Of course, he's long gone now, but Vonnegut was a big influence. I like literary fiction. John Steinbeck, Thornton Wilder are big favorites of mine. I love Stephen King, and lately I've been really into Patrick Rothfuss and a guy named Brian Staveley, something like that.
Oh yes, The Emperor's Blades.
Yeah, he's great. And
yeah.
So I like fantasy is what I like to read. I've never actually written a fantasy novel. Legendarium is sort of a fantasy novel, but a straight up fantasy is actually one of my favorite things to read. And then I like sort of classic literary fiction.
Very interesting. Yeah, I got turned on to Brian Staveley through the Grim Tidings podcast, and he was talking about his book. I listened to the first and the second one on Audible. I still haven't done the third one yet, and apparently there's a fourth book out now that is that's focusing on the assassin. I can't remember what her name is, but it's in the same universe as the trilogy, but it's not the same characters. It's not the siblings. But his writing is very good. It's very visceral. Like like when I first started the first book, there's a scene where this guy kills his daughter, and I was like, "Wow, this is how the book's going to be." All right.
I described his stuff as it's like Game of Thrones without the boring parts.
Oh yeah, exactly. Very, very true. Very true.
Is that the one, Josh, you recommended? I think it was last month.
Yeah,
Emperor's Blades?
the Emperor's Blades and the Providence of Fire, and I can't remember what the Last Mortal Bond, I think, is the third one.
All right.
But you say you like literary fiction. You have written a book called The Man Who Shot John Wilkes Booth, and you pinned that as a weird Western. Can you talk a little about that and how that book came about?
Well, sure. I for several years in that window before I started doing indie publishing, I tried to pursue getting into comics, and it never happened. But I had written the scripts for a 5-issue miniseries, and I had started this story so long ago that this was when the Jonah Hex comic had just come out, and
Right.
a comic called Loveless and Vertigo had just come out, and all those titles have had their full runs and been canceled since then. But I couldn't pin down an artist. I had a guy that was doing some of the book, and then he just couldn't do it fast enough, and then it just never worked out. So
Right.
I had a complete story in comic script for that, and I ended up, after I published Legendarium, I wanted to do something, and I had a complete story that I really liked that nobody had ever read. So I decided I would just transcribe it into being a novel. I released it in 3 parts, and then I released the collected edition, which is what everybody has.
What was that like
And,
going from that? Because comics are kind of like a screenplay, if I understand correctly. They're kind of written in that kind of format with directions to the artist. So what was it like transferring that into a narrative fiction?
It was surprisingly easy because I had it, every page started with a panel that says, in this panel, we're looking at a little house on a hillside. It looks like the house from Dr. Quinn, and there's a horse riding up, and then I would just describe that scene. So it gave me an outline without having an actual outline. So it was pretty easy to write, because I had already put in all the plotting work and stuff. Although, as I got into it, I did make some changes towards the end. Of different directions I thought would go better to make it a finished novel rather than an open-ended comic.
Right.
Did you when you wrote the whole thing? Did you get developmental edits on that, or how did that process work going from the comic strip to the novel?
No, I didn't do any developmental on that one. I had worked with the same editor twice. Star Trek, and then once with a fantasy novel that no one will ever get to read. And then after that, I felt like I had learned what I could from him, and so I applied it all the stuff that I learned, because this was the next full-length thing that I had done.
There's several other people that we've talked to that have mentioned using a developmental editor for a while, but then you kind of get to the point where it's not as necessary once you've kind of figured out how you're going to do things.
I think a lot of it comes to, a sense of confidence in your own craft. I certainly didn't have any confidence in my craft for a long time. And then I felt like somewhere in there between the Bell Curse and John Wilkes Booth that I found my voice. And I knew what I sounded like. I knew how I wanted to write. And
Right.
what I was comfortable with, and what worked for me and what didn't. So, I felt like I took off then, and it just worked for me. So, as far as the, translating it from a comic script into a novel, it really flowed nicely. And like I said, I just changed a little bit at the end because I thought of a better ending.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done pretty well. Okay, not like Legendarium did, but
you said you read it in 3 parts. Did you have it complete before you published the first part? Did you kind of do the staggered release?
I did, and it took me about 6 months between each one, just because of getting distracted at work or not having a good writing schedule down at the time, and that was way too long for something that short to take. And
Right.
so feel like the serialized novel thing does not work for me. I don't do that way anymore. I write the whole thing and release it once it's done.
Yeah, I started doing that. I saw what Bunker was doing, like what he did with Pennsylvania, what Howie did with Wool and all that, and I was like, I could do that. I can write 25,000 word parts and put them all together at the end. And I tried that, and I got one 25,000 word part, and then I got a 40,000 word part, and now the third part that I have is like 109,000 words, and I'm like, it's not working at all. So I published the first one thinking, yeah, I could do the second one really quick. It took me like 8 months to do the second one, and now we're working on a year for the third one. And so, yeah, I'm never going to do that again. I'm probably actually going to combine number 1 and number 2 into one and then have a trilogy.
That's the Neverland trilogy you're talking about?
Yeah, Second Star. So,
Second Star, right.
Yeah, I'm not going to do a serial.
Traditional wisdom would have you now releasing a book every 90 days.
Right.
And, if you think about traditional publishing, Stavely released those books every year, maybe 15, 16 months in between them.
Right.
And, Rothfuss, it's, 2 or 3, 4 years between them. And George Martin is 26 years between each one.
Yeah. It's true, though. It's true.
And I think that readers get exhausted. There's so many people out there that you can read, and there's only so many hours in a day, and you've got work and whatever junk you watch on TV and Facebook and your family and whatever to keep you occupied. So I just think that people are getting overwhelmed with too much stuff. So to me, I think in the long run it'll be better to release a novel a year.
Right.
As long as it's your best novel, the most compelling story, and all those things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, and we talked a little bit yesterday on the sound check on the weird Apocalypse Weird project that came out last year, and you hit it on the head. I think that there's just too much, and like with Chris Fox, he did a novel a month, and a lot of other people were like, "Oh, I can just throw all these books together and just go bam, 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 and release 12 novels a year." And like you said, I don't have time. Sometimes I read on my Kindle. Like I spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes when I'm going to bed reading on my Kindle. But most of the time I'm listening to audiobooks. And when I'm doing an audiobook, I prefer it to be a longer book. Over 10 hours at least is what I like to get. Mm-hmm. But that takes a couple weeks to listen to sometimes. So when I look at a series and I see this author is just releasing all these books, I'm like, yeah, but I want all this. I want to read this other stuff too. And if I get caught up in him, I'm going to be stuck, going down his rabbit hole for a long time, and
overwhelming. And you think about, like, I have the Audible plan with 1 credit a month, right? And
right.
That means every month I get a new audiobook, and sometimes I don't finish that one in a month.
Yeah.
If I'm distracted by other things. So, we're talking 12 novels a year, and maybe I get through 10 of them. Right. And usually we'll keep one on my nightstand, and it'll take me 6 months to read it, 5 pages at a time. I don't like the ebooks. I like the print books.
Yeah. And I love print books, but my wife is generally asleep when I read, and she hates the light on. So I have the Paperwhite, so I can just have the deal there and read it.
I ran out of physical space in my house with all the print books. Yeah, I mean, I have all my bookshelves are full, and I've got boxes in storage, and we've been doing a little bit of decluttering and minimalist stuff, and so I tend to give those books away or sell them, so I don't have these mountains of paper in my room.
Yeah.
I like that you're also like me, and you're not really concerned about doing the novel a month or the novel every 90 days. I know, Scott, you're working on the novel every 90-day program. I tried to
them out right now, but
it's just, there's so many things that I want to do. I love writing, but there's other things that I want to do too. Like I like doing this show. I like doing the editing and stuff for the podcast. And I like playing games, like video games. So I like being able to, come down here and write 5,000 words a day, or 500 to 1,000 words a day or whatever, and and have fun publishing and writing.
What happened? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Josh.
No, I couldn't. My dream is to be a full-time writer, but slamming 5,000 words a day just to make your quota is, man, I don't know. I think I'd get burnt out real quick.
What happened to me is that I have a couple of days off, or for some reason I'm not at work for a few days. I was caring for some family members, so I was off. And so then I'm like, oh, I could easily do a book a month now because I'm not working. And so I got there and I thought, right now I have 3 books on pre-order once a month, January, February, and March. But now that I'm back at work full time and doing all my part times and doing the show now, I'm like, oh, that's a lot. So, yeah, I tend to jump before I look, and then it's kind of a nasty crash sometimes when I hit the ground. But
ultimately you have to figure out what works for your pace. You've got to be happy when you're doing it, otherwise you're doing something wrong.
Right.
I know guys that write really fast. I don't know. I'm assuming Nick Cole, and Nick.
Yep, he's been on the show a couple times.
Yeah,
Nick writes 100,000 words a month. So
yeah. He knocks him out. Yeah, good stuff too.
Yeah,
so.
He does, and that's the pace that he's happy at. And I know other people that do the same thing, that they write so much. But I can write 500 to 1,000 words a day and have it be good, or I could write 3,000 words a day and have it be trash.
Right.
And I'd rather be good. I'd rather have fun, be engaged in it, and honestly. If I was releasing a book a month or a book every 90 days, I feel like I would burn out my fans.
Yeah. But you do other stuff too. Like you do formatting for people, you do book covers and stuff. Can you tell us a little about how you got into that?
Well, I worked in a print shop for many years, and I was their graphic design person. When I left there, I started working for a telecoms magazine, and I did graphics for them. And so it's just something I've always done, and I started doing it for myself. And then when Apocalypse Weird was going, they needed somebody to do the print formatting. And so it landed on me. I started doing it, and then before I knew it, it just took off, and I started doing formatting for lots of people. Nick Cole was probably my first real client, and then I've done a bunch of stuff for Michael Bunker and Eamon Ambrose and Jason on Spock and a whole slew of other people that Bob Williams.
Any special software?
I use Adobe InDesign.
Do you use special software with your formatting, or how do you do it?
I use Adobe InDesign for the interior formatting, and when I do covers, I don't do as many covers as I do just interiors, but when I do covers, I do.
So you're a serious book formatter, because I've read several people that Adobe InDesign is not for somebody just with a casual interest to just jump in there and start banging around, because it takes some skill, from what I understand.
It does, and it's when I worked in the print shop, we would occasionally get Microsoft Publisher files, and our nickname for that was Microsoft Punisher. So InDesign is complex, but it's like anything. You can learn it. It's the best tool for that particular process. But it doesn't mean you can't do it in Word, or you can't do it in Publisher. It can be done. It's just a matter of I'm comfortable with InDesign because I've been using it for 20 years.
Right. Do you still take on clients for formatting and book covers or whatever?
I do. Yep.
No, we've had a couple of clients or a couple of people on here that do, like, say, book covers. We had Tom Edwards on a couple of months ago, and he does a whole bunch of science fiction book covers, and he's booked out all the way to like August of next year, probably farther than that. And so if you don't get in on them quick, then it's kind of like Ellen Campbell or David Edwards. They're really David Gatewood. They're really good freelance editors, but you've got to plan ahead to get on their schedule.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I used Ellen to do the editing on Bleak December, and she's a gem to work with. I really enjoy her. And David is a good guy. He lives not too far from me, so I've had dinner with him a couple times, and He's a good guy. I like him.
Cool.
We've had David on the show. We might want to try to get Ellen on the show. I like both of their. It's funny, like you think of editors as these people that just sit in a room and read books and then take a red pen to them, but their posts are generally pretty funny. Like I love reading David's comments that authors will post, like his comment in Word about whatever they're doing, and it's making fun of them. And then Ellen will make fun of Word all the time.
Editors, you have to have like this real dry sense of humor to be an editor, and alcoholism probably helps that job.
It's true.
For all editors, just all the ones that I know, hard.
They probably want to after some of the stuff they probably get sent. They probably need some professional therapy to deal with that. I mean,
oh yeah, banging their head against the desk, like no, this is not what you do.
Yeah.
So short stories versus novels. Do you prefer one or the other? What's your favorite medium?
I prefer
novel.
Yeah, I don't feel like I even get pot boiling on a short story before I run out of words. And long form, you can really delve into character and into setting and everything. So long form is definitely what I like. Although I loved writing comics. Comics are an underappreciated form of media, and people look at Captain America, Batman, and whatever, and that's when I think of comics. But there are some amazing comic books out there, graphic novels out there that read because it's it's just superheroes. But
right,
yeah, I love the comic form, and I loved writing it. So maybe someday I'll go back to it. But to me, that comics hasn't translated to the indie movement the way that the novels have. So
it's tough because I the only comics I was allowed to read as a kid were Star Trek comics, and so I read a lot of Star Trek comics. I couldn't read like Wolverine stuff, even though I love those stories. But I wanted to get into comics when a couple of years ago when I started doing this, and I got when smartphones came around and tablets came around, and you could do comics on your tablet. But I could never make the transition, I guess. I don't know. I like the medium. I like the stylistic, a lot of things like you can do with comics that you can't do with books or movies. But it's just
the thing that I like about them is they're like the depth of a novel with the cinematography of a movie.
Absolutely.
So it's like finds the best of them. So I'm going to recommend the comic to you.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Called The Unwritten. It was a Vertigo title, and it ran for something like 60 or 70 issues. Mike Carey wrote it, and it's great. It's my favorite comic probably that I've ever read.
Is it Mike Carey with a C or a K? Mike
C.
C. Okay, sweet.
I'll look it up.
There we go. I think
Unwritten. You said Unwritten.
The Unwritten.
The
Unwritten. Okay.
I had a friend when I was kind of new at the job I'm at now. I had a friend who was a very talented artist, and we used to work at Denny's doing security. And I wrote some screenplays or comic scripts, however you call them, and he would do some drawings for it. I was always really excited about it, and he was so talented. But the time investment for an artist into because you can bang out the story pretty quick compared to how long it takes to turn that into graphics.
Right.
So I think that's probably one of the things that holds us back is just, I don't think you can keep up with the indie world.
Right, for sure. And I mean, it's when you invest in your own novel, it's whatever money you put in the cover and the formatter or the editor or anything, and then you're done. That's your thing, your baby, you're invested in it. That artist, I mean, unless you're paying them, and they're worth a lot of money. I mean, they probably make per page what it takes, Ellen or David to edit the entire novel.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's an insane amount of money that you would have to put out to put out a 22-page
Well,
thing.
and plus with comics, you think how long it takes to do the art. Some people they draw or create at different speeds, but you usually have a pencil sketch artist, then you have an inker, and you have a color person, you have a page. Those are all separate artists. So a professionally made comic book takes like 5 different artists to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's unless you're drawing your own stuff, and most of the people that are artists that I know that are involved in the indie world are cover artists.
Right.
They do beautiful single illustrations of a cover, and then they move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, and most of theirs are done on a Photoshop anyway. So the time and effort it takes to, like you said, Scott, to pen and ink and color and paint, and then bring it over into the digital medium is cut a lot down in Photoshop.
You have people that are specialized, and that's all they do all day long is ink other people's sketches, and they might draw on their own, but really they are like savants at making it pop by just doing the inking.
Right. I'm interested to know, because you have different things that you do. You have the podcasting and your formatting and then your writing, but you also do a lot of people are getting into Patreon, and a lot of people are like Bunker is doing his Hell in the Sea project, and now you've got a project on Patreon. Can you talk a little bit about how you got that project started, what inspired the story, and what Patreon is doing for you and what you're doing for your Patreons?
Sure. So to take a step back from it, I'm doing the formatting for Michael's Hell in the Sea book.
Okay.
So I had never even heard of Patreon before. And he launched this thing, and he got me lined up to do the formatting for him. And as I was, observing, I was like, Michael, nobody is going to pay you to read a chapter of your book. And people are paying him to read a chapter of his book a month. Well, shoot, if you could do it,
right?
Maybe I could do it. So I started looking at it, and I explored the option for several months. And what I decided to do, back in 2014, I had done with Michael Legendarium, which was a sci-fi fantasy story, and a lot of readers for me, and some of those readers were willing to go on the journey of a Western or a Stephen King style horror novel or whatever else I've pitched at them. But I think what a lot of people would like to see me do is get back to something that's more straight science fiction. And having the Star Trek background, I decided that what I would do is make a Star Trek style, and I know it's going to take me forever to get this thing written. So I would, instead of serializing it every 90 days, I would do one chapter a month. And the people that want to read it in a serial format, they can support me on Patreon and read it for as little as $1 a month. And they can follow it that way.
So go ahead. I have a question when you're done.
Yeah, when it's all done, it'll be a novel, and it'll come out, and all the other people can just buy it then when it comes out.
So how long do you think the project... Oh, sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
Oh, I guess I'm the one who doesn't know what Patreon is.
So it's an online service where people can support you to basically be your patron of the arts. Okay. So you think of like the community theater, and people donate $10 a year or $50 a year or whatever to the community theater, and they get their name in the program. It's just like that, except you get your name in the book.
Awesome. You're patron of the arts.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And you can do different levels of perks for them. So for $1 a month, you just get to read the story, and for $5 you get your name as on the Patreon list, and going up you get a monthly private email or a video, or there's one lady that I'm supposed to record and dedicate a song to.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's going to be embarrassing. Somebody else gets a custom Patreon exclusive version of the book when it comes out, and with a different cover or something. So there's all these little perks that you can get in.
Cool. I like that.
What it is there are people out there that that support the arts, and maybe they've got a little bit of extra money, or maybe they're really pinching their pennies in order to do this, but they're doing it because they love the arts and they found an author that they relate to in some way. Michael has a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, he has some people who don't like him so much, but he has a lot of people that have connected to him. And that's why they're willing to support him, because they like him even more than what he's doing. It's him. And you think about, you asked me who my favorite authors were earlier, and I said Vonnegut and Steinbeck. And I love Timequake, and I love Slaughterhouse-Five and Grapes of Wrath, but I love Steinbeck, and I love Vonnegut. So it's the author is, I think, the real property more than even. And I think that there are people that have connected to that idea, and then there's other people, they just want to read your book if they like the summary.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I've said that a lot about Bunker, is that I liked his Pennsylvania story. It's not really my flavor, but I liked it. But I like him as an author. I think more so, I like him as a person more than I like him as an author. I think he's like a very genuine, helpful, very kind person that is very smart at the same time, and he's very approachable, and he'll talk to you about anything. And I think the Bunker brand is just him. Like, it's not his books or his writing or his covers or anything. It's just him. Whether you like him for his his off-grid stuff or whatever.
The ability to roll an awesome cigar.
Rolling a cigar, exactly.
Rolling a cigar, see?
But I mean, that's the thing with every author, right? I mean, his whole brand is, you take off this hat and you put on the straw hat and the suspenders and the cigar and all that stuff. But it's him,
Right.
Like in wrestling, you could have, Stunning Steve Austin is some guy in the mid card that wins the tag team titles, but Stone Cold Steve Austin is the same guy with the volume turned up to 40.
Right.
And all of a sudden he takes off because it's his own personality.
Right. Well, that's what you're talking about. A long-term career is you get those people that they're going to stick with you.
Right.
And that's pretty cool.
Right. And what I think a lot of people do is they get in their head the picture of what a writer should be, and they think about, that somebody with the corduroy jacket with the patches on the elbows, and they're drinking the scotch or whatever, and it's this stereotype, and they try and make themselves fit that stereotype. Right. I used to go to this Star Trek convention every year, and I mean, I have a lot of friends there, but we all would be there dressed the same, talking the same about the same kind of stuff, and everybody's expecting it. And when you see somebody roll in and they're wearing a straw hat and they're dressed like they're Amish, then all of a sudden that person really stands out, and it's just because it's a real person doing their real thing.
We have to think a fascinating person will write fascinating fiction, and so sometimes meeting them, and that's not always true. Some people are in their little writing bunker and they don't do much. But I mean, the first time I saw Michael Bunker, I'm curious to what he's going to write. He's going to do something different. I can tell.
To be honest, like all those years I did traditional publishing, I did all that stuff. I had the corduroy jacket in my closet, and it never got me anywhere. And then we moved out of the suburbs, and we moved way out to the sticks, and I started wearing overalls and this stupid vest and this dumb hat and whatever. Stopped shaving, and all of a sudden people were interested in what I had going on, because there was taking pictures of me with this duck or this cow or milking twice a day or something, and it's interested in what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
And how you fit writing into your life. I'm a writer with my corduroy.
They want to connect you with the person who you are, not as some sort of stereotype.
Right.
Which will take us back to, I remember growing up with corduroy pants, but they made that whoop, 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 whoop sound. They're probably not coming back. But yeah, I mean, like, for example, people might look at Josh right now and think they could connect with a cowboy hat wearing literary outlaw.
That's right. They could.
That's
right. I wonder if YouTube will pick this as the thumbnail for last week. We had Rob on the show, and I did this, and it looked really silly, and that's the YouTube clip that they decided to thumbnail. So I'm interested to see which picture they choose to thumbnail.
It made my day. It really did. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
That's probably going to be it. See, we can take bets now. We'll have a bets now what YouTube will pick and see if there's some sort of rhyme or reason to it.
Well, speaking of Literary Outlaws, before we wrap up, you and Jason Onspach do the Literary Outlaws podcast. Can you talk a little bit about how that got started and what you guys do on the show?
Yeah. So it was all my idea. I had that shirt that you're wearing, that glorious shirt, and I that shirt went viral, and all kinds of authors and stuff were buying it. And I was like, well, shoot, how do I capitalize on this? And I realized that I didn't want to do a show with me talking to myself, and I got to talking to Jason, and I pitched the idea to him, and we originally started it as an interview show, and then we did 25 episodes or so of interviews, and then I kind of burned out on the whole interview thing, and I felt, I know he did too, and we decided that instead of doing that, we would just have him and me talking about whatever is going on. And this week we watched the trailer for Rogue One, and the next week we watched and the cities were burning, and the following week we talked about Marvel Comics or something. And it's just us talking about whatever we have going on in our lives at any given moment. And I don't know if anyone's listening.
I listen.
Yeah, he listens.
Listen.
That's one.
That's good. No, it's two.
So anyway, it's just us talking, and the Literary Outlaw brand is that shirt. Maybe I'll make another shirt someday.
Coincidentally, if you guys don't know, this is a unique, one-of-a-kind, special edition Literary Outlaw shirt because it printed incorrectly. Let me see if I can get up here and you guys can see it. You see that the E's in the Read and the Indy are messed up, and that was a mistake that the printer made when they printed the shirt. And so there's only a handful of these unique.
So
I've got to actually the one that's
$50,000.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to frame it and put it on the wall. You can't get this shirt anymore.
Yeah, I knew that was bad because when I uploaded the artwork, it rendered that way, and I was like, oh, this is bad. So I contacted them, and they said, oh, we'll fix it. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
And they printed like 50 of those shirts wrong, and I was on the phone with them every day for 2 weeks trying to convince them, and I was private messaging people and being like, you got to complain to Teespring that their shirts are printed wrong. And they finally reprinted them all. And then afterwards, I pulled them from there, and they're at a different printer now called T-Chip. So
okay.
They are out there. People can still buy them.
They're great shirts. I mean, I got my special edition and the regular one. I think maybe we should do that for KSM. We'll see. Maybe we'll do coffee mugs or something.
We'll get one, yeah.
The
shirt will have you doing the...
Yeah, I'll have the...
I have the misprinted shirt too, and it's what I wear on butchering day. Butchering chickens. I'm wearing the misprinted Literary Outlaw shirt.
Nice.
Probably got some character there,
Yeah.
The blood, you can't see the blood on the black shirt.
Right.
Coincidentally, this is what I wear when I go and do my research for my serial killer novel.
You'd spray some luminol around there and get the alternate light source and see it glow like a forensic laboratory there. Yeah,
that's right.
Suspense novel.
Well, Kevin, we're coming up on the hour. Can you give our listeners and readers where they can find out about your writing, your podcasting, or formatting business, wherever people can link up with you?
Sure. The best place to find me is on my website. It's kevinGsummers.com. And the podcast is literaryoutlaws.com. And that's me.
Awesome. And if they go to your website, they can find your formatting links or contact you about that there too?
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody who came and hung out with us live. If you're listening on the iTunes feed, you can check out the cool short on our YouTube channel, Keystroke Medium. Just search it. If you haven't liked or subscribed yet, please do that. Please go to Amazon and search Kevin G. Summers. Pick up his Bleak December book, which is just released here in the last couple of weeks. and that's a full-length novel, his latest. Be sure to pick that up and give it a read. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll see you on the next Keystroke Medium show. Take it easy.